All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming for our roundtable, which is AI accelerated biological risks, delving into Asia's challenges and emerging solutions. This is a roundtable that is jointly organized by AI Safety Asia, the Singapore AI Safety Hub, and Southeast Asia Bio. So, before we begin, we're going to first briefly introduce the three organizations that are the hosts of today's roundtable. So firstly, we have the Singapore AI Safety Hub. So I'm the program manager at the Singapore AI Safety Hub, and what and in short form known as SASH, and we're a nonprofit focused on technical research, governance, and ecosystem development in AI safety. So we offer co-working events and a community space for those who are working on or interested in AI safety, and we are based in Singapore. So our mission is to strengthen and grow the AI safety community in Singapore through community building, raising awareness, upskilling talent, and facilitating international cooperation. So to find out more about the Singapore AI Safety Hub, you can go to aisafety.sg, or you can scan the QR code, and we also regularly host AI safety events in person in Singapore as well as some online. And you can go to Luma/Sash or scan the QR code. And so with that, I'll also pass on the time to PT, who will introduce the other two host organizations.
Thank you so much, Valerie. So my name is PT. I'm currently the representative of AI Safety Asia, but also on Southeast Asia Biosecurity. So a little bit more on AI Safety Asia. About us, so AI Safety Asia is a global nonprofit dedicated to building Asia as a globally leading, safe, and responsible AI innovator. AI Safety Asia strives to minimize the risk of AI adoptions while supporting societies to adopt AI safely. And our mission is very simple. Here at AI Safety Asia, we believe that achieving safe and governed AI begins with building bridges between generations, disciplines, and regions through actionable steps. If you'd like to learn more about AI Safety Asia, you can go to our website at aisafety.asia or follow us on LinkedIn. We also have we're very, very active on LinkedIn as well. And on Southeast Asia Biosecurity, or CBio, CBio is a network of biosecurity researchers based here in Southeast Asia. CBio aims to fill a very critical gap in global biosecurity by focusing on Southeast Asia's unique challenges and needs. For our missions, it's also relatively simple. We aim to bridge top-down strategic foresight with bottom-up capacity building to advance biosecurity in Southeast Asia by prioritizing high-impact, underexplored global catastrophic biological risk interventions. If you'd like to learn more, we have a newsletter at Substack, cbio.substack.com, and we also have a LinkedIn as well. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to the event flow of today. So today we're going to start off very kindly with a keynote presentation by Concordia AI on the converging risk of AI and biosecurity. And then we're going to begin the roundtable discussion and move on to the audience Q&A, which you can see up right here, the QR code to scan to leave your questions or upvote any questions. You can remain anonymous, of course. And then we're going to be closing remarks. With that, I'd like to introduce our speakers and moderator who have kindly agreed to lend us their expertise on this very area. So first here we have Mr. Julius Cesar Imperial Trajano, who is a research fellow at RSIS, based here in Singapore under the university, the Nanyang Technical University here in Singapore. And next in the panel, we have Sunishal Dev, who is a technology and security policy fellow at RAND, based in the US. And next in the panel, we have Dr. Suryesh Kumar Namdeo, who is a senior research analyst at Indian Institutes of Science, based in India, and also a fellow at Asia Center for Health Security, housed it under National University of Singapore as well. And then we have Brian She, who is a founder and CEO of Concordia AI. And of course, this session would not be completed without our moderator, who is Ryan Teo. He's a PhD researcher at the University of Birmingham. And yeah, with that, I'd like to pass the mic on to Bryant.
Hello, everyone. Could you hear me all right? So I assume that people can hear me. So again, my name is Brian Zhe. I am the founder and CEO of Concord AI. A big thank you to Singapore AI Safety Hub, AI Safety Asia, and Southeast Asia Biosecurity for organizing this event. So just to start off, I will briefly introduce Concord AI. We are a social enterprise focused on AI safety and governance with offices in Beijing and Singapore. Our work fall into three main areas to manage the critical risk posed by AI to public safety and international security. First, we help shape AI policy through participating in national standards and consulting with government bodies. Second, we work directly with leading AI labs and companies in China to develop safety frameworks and best practices. And third, we focus on international cooperation, hosting events like the AI Safety Forum at the World AI Conference, participating in global forums like the United Nations and AI Safety Summits, as well as publishing research on the AI safety landscape in China and Singapore to inform international understanding. So over the past 1 to 2 years, there have been increasing calls from global experts in both the AI and the life sciences communities regarding the risk at their intersection. In the first half of my presentation, I will outline three types of emerging threats, drawing on the statement on biosecurity risk at the convergence of AI and the life sciences, which I helped draft and presented at the Biological Weapons Convention Working Group meeting just a few months ago. And then in the second half, I will discuss three recommendations for international action based on a recent report by Concordia AI and Tianjin University Center for Biosafety Research and Strategy, which is a leading biosecurity think tank in China. So the first threat is that AI could lower the barrier for less sophisticated actors to plan and design dangerous biological agents. If we look at the graph on the left from the International AI Safety Report, in 2024, the accuracy of large language models in answering bioweapons-related questions increased from just 15% to 80%. The graph on the right is based on a technical report led by Shanghai AI Lab, which is a national-level AI institute in China, and co-authored by our staff. It shows that all 18 widely used models we tested now outperform human experts in their knowledge of hazardous biological information. On this slide, our Frontier AI risk monitoring platform set up at Concordia AI also evaluates over 40 large language models on the ability to troubleshoot real-world wet lab protocols. As you can see on the graph above, several leading models already match or exceed the performance of human experts. For example, the O3 model now outperformed 94% of expert virologists on a subject matter test, which measured the ability to troubleshoot complex virology lab protocols. Now, compounding this problem is a widespread lack of safeguards. When we tested these models with harmful requests, we found that less than 10% of the models, whether they are from leading companies from China, US, or Europe, or elsewhere, less than 10% of these models had more than 80% refusal rates. And the worst model has only a 5% refusal rate. And this really points to a systemic deficiency in current safety measures. Now, with this background, just within the last 6 months, several leading AI companies, including OpenAI, DeepMind, and Anthropic, they have now classified their own models as having crossed a higher biological risk threshold. So taking a precautionary approach, these models are now on the verge of being capable of helping a novice plan and design a dangerous biological attack. The second threat model moved beyond what is already known, is that AI could potentially raise the ceiling on what is possible, helping to design pathogens that are more dangerous than anything that nature or humans have yet produced. For example, the AI tool EV Escape can predict viral evolution with stunning accuracy. It correctly predicted 66% of SARS-CoV-2 variants, compared to just 17% for older methods. While this can accelerate vaccine development, it could also be misused to engineer viruses that evade our immunity. This capability to generate novelty is also seen in AI systems that are trained on vast amount of DNA data. For example, researchers at Princeton were able to jailbreak these models, essentially kind of tricking the models into generating pathogen-like sequences in about 60% of the time, which found that fewer than 3% of them have any form of misuse prevention built in. Examples include safety evaluations, access controls, or filtering of training data. Now, thankfully, the most powerful models tend to have some safeguards, but still, this shows that we're far from having enough safety prevention for biological AI models. The third type of threat is that AI could reduce the effectiveness of current biosecurity and biodefense measures. For example, synthesis screening can act as a critical choke point to prevent the physical manufacturing of hazardous genetic sequences. But this defense relies on matching sequences to known threats. AI could be used to design novel sequences that perform a hazardous function, but are different enough to go undetected by the current screening measures. In other words, the current list of regulated agents and toxins would likely fail to detect the possibility new or modified pathogens that are designed by future biological AI models. Now, moving on to recommendations. First, I think we must establish global horizon scanning and early warning mechanisms. The pace of change is simply too fast for a reactive posture. I think it's critical to monitor three key areas. A, the rapidly expanding capabilities of language and biological AI models. B, the increasing integration of different tools, especially with the use of AI agents. And C, high levels of lab automation. For example, leading labs and companies are already developing AI scientists, quote unquote, that use both cloud labs and robotics to automate many steps of the scientific processes. This type of automation could really be the key to overcoming the current bottlenecks in the sort of build, test, learn cycle in the life sciences research. Therefore, I think we need an international expert panel or an observatory to publish regular assessments of these trends and their global biosecurity implications. Now, my second recommendation is for leading developers and the industry to implement proactive risk management framework. For example, Concordia AI worked with Shanghai AI Lab to co-author a framework for general purpose AI developers to identify, assess, mitigate, and then govern a set of severe AI risks that pose threats to public safety, including for biosecurity. In particular, we suggested establishing clear red lines, points where AI deployment must pause because the risks are simply unacceptable, and also yellow lines, some of the early warning indicators or emerging capabilities of concerns that would trigger extra safety and security mitigations. One concrete safety measure is removing hazardous information from the AI training dataset. This measure has been recommended in China's TC260 AI Safety Governance Framework, which is from a national standard committee. And I think that could be applied to both biological AI models as well as large language models. Also, a recent article in Nature described how developers of Evo2, an AI that writes genome-scale sequences, could address biosafety concerns by excluding viruses that affect humans from the kind of model's training set. There is also other papers demonstrating that data filtering that minimize biothreat knowledge in large language models could be effective even after the models have been open source. Moving on, my third and final recommendation is to prepare for catastrophic scenarios with robust emergency response plans. This year, the Chinese government added AI risk to the National Emergency Response Plan, alongside concerns such as cybersecurity, biological security, and also natural disasters. Given this context, Concordia AI partnered with Tsinghua University, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Oxford University, and other partners to run a scenario planning workshop on a global pandemic enabled by the use of AI biological tools by a criminal group. Our workshop really revealed that the international policymaking community is dangerously unprepared for these scenarios. Therefore, we must conduct more of these exercises to identify our vulnerabilities and build effective international response plans. To sum up, AI threatens to lower the technical barrier for biological attack, raise the ceiling of potential harm, and also undermine our existing defenses. To counter these threats, I think we must act now to establish a global observatory for horizon scanning and risk assessment, implement proactive risk management frameworks, and then also prepare our collective emergency response plans. I think the stakes are very high, but by acting proactively and collaboratively, we can try to steer these powerful technologies towards global benefits and away from catastrophic harm. Thank you again, and I look forward to the conversations.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was very, very insightful. And congratulations on all the work that Concordia AI has been doing. I think that was really amazing. And yeah, I think now that we've laid the foundation, Brian's really done a great job at laying the foundation on just some kind of like the concepts and what is currently going on in the world right now on this converging area. We now will be moving forward to our roundtable discussion. I'd like to hand it over to Ryan, who will be our moderator today. And yeah, Ryan, the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks PT, and thanks to Valerie and Melissa for organizing this. And also thank you to the panelists who have made their time to join us in this discussion. I'm really excited for us to have this discussion as a contribution to the global conversation on AI biorisks. And for the next 45 minutes or so, we'll be having a structured discussion before we open up the floor to Q&A from the audience. So Brian has already taken us through a really in-depth introduction to AI biorisks, but I'd like to give all of our panelists a chance to introduce themselves, but also answer the question, what keeps you up at night? What do you think are the most urgent risks in terms of work that you've done, whether it's in biosecurity governance or technical evaluations? So I'd invite you to introduce yourself and also answer that question. Let's start with Julius.
My name is Julius Trajano. As Pete mentioned earlier, I'm based here in Singapore, and I'm a research fellow for non-traditional security studies at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in NTU, Singapore. So basically, I'm part of a team within our center that conducts research on international security and biosecurity in the context of Southeast Asia and the Asia Pacific region. So I have been writing academic and policy-oriented articles on biological security and its relationship with international and national security here in Southeast Asia. We have conducted a Southeast Asia-wide field research on the elite or expert opinion on biosecurity priorities, threats, issues, and challenges in Southeast Asia. So what keeps me awake at night with regard to biosecurity, in our research, it remains the main issue is the emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases, followed by the potential leaks from, whether accidental or incidental, from laboratories, whether it's from BSL-4 or BSL-3 labs, all the way down to your ordinary diagnostic hospital labs. With regard to AI and biotechnology, unfortunately, that's not the priority of policymakers here in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think we can unpack that a bit later. Dev, would you like to introduce yourself and share what keeps you up at night?
Hey everyone, my name's Dev, and you'll have to excuse me, I'm a little bit sick today, so I'll keep my responses brief. So I'm a AI evaluations research scientist at RAND. I'm mainly working on AI capability evaluations at the intersection of AI and bio. So we've been building lots of agentic evaluations. We think that's a neglected area in AI bio. Most evaluations are kind of multiple choice or simple formats. We want to test whether LLM agents can do the entire biological design risk chain. So we are plugging LLMs into biological design tools like ESM3 and EVO2 and seeing whether they can design novel proteins and submit orders to cloud labs. And that is the thing that keeps me up at night, is especially the digital physical barrier where LLM agents are now able to submit orders to cloud labs autonomously. It's honestly no big deal if AI can design a virus and keep it on the computer, but once it crosses over into the physical world, then we have a big problem. And about 2 years ago, Carnegie Mellon University had this paper called Co-Scientist, where they demonstrated that GPT-4 is able to submit orders to Emerald Cloud Lab and synthesize chemical sequences. And that was 2 years ago. So now obviously we have GPT-5 and much more capable models. I think these risks are only getting greater, and we don't have any standardized processes for synthesis screening at cloud labs or know your customer protocols. Right now it's kind of self-governed, so there could be holes in those defenses.
Yeah, that's a bit unsettling to hear about, but thanks. Suryash, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Suryes. I work at the Institute of Science, and my apologies if there is some background noise. I'm currently in a hotel in Paris. Yes, I work at IISc, Institute of Science in Bangalore. I'm also a fellow with the National University of Singapore Research Center for Health Security, and I'm associated with as part of the advisory board of the International Biosecurity and Biosafety Initiative for Science, and have earlier worked with the United Nations as the Science and Technology Consultant for the Biological Weapons Convention. My current focus is on biosecurity priorities in India, and AI bio is definitely a very, very important topic there, and a really emerging threat, partly also because how rapidly it is changing the whole biological threat landscape around the world, but also in different regions and nations more specifically. Right. I think what keeps me up at night is probably similar to what other speakers have said. I think the current biosecurity measures that are in place, because of these advancements in both LLMs as well as the biological design tools, a lot of them are no longer going to be as effective as we once thought they would be. Right. And also, there have been a number of studies and red teaming exercises showing that. And also a recent science paper that showed also that the sequence screening tools might not be as effective. They are trying to, have some patches and try to fill those gaps, but still, there is so much more to be done. I think probably one of the most important thing here is that while there is very small number of people who kind of realizes that and doing something about it, we don't have all stakeholders, taking those kind of action. So we don't have, for example, policymakers taking it seriously and making it priority at the moment. And that's where I think a lot of work has to go. And also the scientific community, the role that they can also play has not been fully understood by them. And a lot of advocacy and engagement is needed to address those things. So yeah, thank you very much. I would stop here and then discuss more later.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we're starting to see some themes emerge about the need to get stakeholders to prioritize these risks, and we'll unpack that further later. So Brian, would you like to share, I guess you've already introduced yourself and the work that Concordia does, but what keeps you up at night? Sorry, I think you have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. I think one topic would be the governance of open source AI models. On the one hand, I think it offers significant advantages in fostering global research, democratizing access, and enabling kind of third-party transparency and auditing. But I think it also requires careful consideration when it comes to the potential misuse. For example, the creators of the EVO2 genomic foundation model try to exclude viral genomes that would infect eukaryotic hosts from the original training data set. But they released the model weights openly. which is very common in academia. And within weeks, there are some other researchers that fine-tune these published weights by incorporating data on viruses that would infect humans. In this case, it's from a kind of banal virus family, so it's not a big deal. But it really shows that future kind of oversight and governance policies should address the possibility that even if there are safety guardrails and kind of data filtering built in for the model, if they are openly released, it is possible for malicious actors to fine-tune it, and that could lead to some unintended consequences. So I think that's one question that is worth deliberating in advance.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we've collected a good set of problems to keep even more people awake at night. And not to dig the problem a bit further, I think I'd like to get your thoughts insofar as your work for all the panelists, insofar as your work intersects with Asia as a region, in whichever corner of Asia that your work focuses on. How are these problems different? How do they manifest differently in Asia? What does this problem mean in this region, whether it's because of the unique bioeconomy or the governance structures, or even the people doing AI as well? Like, and I know we've sort of been doing this one by one, but if anyone would like to go ahead, just raise your hand and if not, we can start with Brian, since you've already unmuted your mic.
I think it's a tough question because there is so much economic, cultural, demographic, and policy diversity in Asia. But I guess there is a very high population density, and also the economies in Asia are interconnected. As we speak, there is the APEC summit that is happening. And so some of these factors could make any pandemic outbreaks more devastating than in some other regions of the world. And I think it's really critical to educate the public and to have dialogue with policymakers about what a potential outbreak enabled by AI could mean for the region. And I think there's also some opportunities for the region. For example, I remember that in 2024, there is the ASEAN Leaders Declaration on strengthening regional biosafety and biosecurity. There's also the ongoing kind of Southeast Asia strategic biosecurity dialogue. And so one idea is to expand some of these mechanisms to include considerations for AI, and not necessarily just using, not just viewing AI as a threat, but also thinking about how we can better use AI for pandemic preparedness, right? Using AI to also speed up vaccine development, using AI for better biosurveillance. So addressing some of these existing gaps in the region, I think that could also be an opportunity. Yeah, over.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good summary, and also a really good reminder that the reason why AI bio problems are especially difficult is because we don't want to stifle innovation and creativity that can produce benefits. So Julius and Suresh, earlier you've both brought up the idea or the limitation that policymakers in Asia have other priorities, or at least they don't see AI bio as a big priority. Could you elaborate on this a bit further, Julius?
Yeah. So in when we talk to officials around the region, like how they view biosecurity from, for example, from naturally occurring threats, like from diseases, zoonotic viruses, and from biotech and AI, they perceive that the AI biotech is currently a non-issue in Southeast Asia. In fact, AI for them is a very useful partner in in helping them to, for example, to strengthen the pandemic preparedness infrastructure and capacity, early warning, monitoring system of their respective countries or their respective national laboratories. So for them, AI is a useful tool, and whenever we ask them about, oh, how about the dual use implication of the research that you're doing, whether it's backed up by AI or by other biotech, they would say that it's not their intention to misuse whatever they're doing, and for them, it's like stricter regulations would mean you're barking on the wrong tree, because whoever nefarious actor that who will misuse AI and biotech will not necessarily follow whatever rules, norms, or AI standards that you're gonna come up. And so the experts would continuously reiterate that it's in the context of Southeast Asia, it's the diseases, preventing the spread of pandemics in Southeast Asia with the assistance of AI and other emerging biotech. So, and Southeast Asia, it's a open economy for biopharma, biotech industry, and they're not in the mood of imposing strict regulation, but instead of a very most of the countries in the region are very welcoming to investments, biotech investments, and imposing stricter regulation for them will deliver a different message that Southeast Asia is not open to biotech and scientific innovation.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and a perspective that we don't really get to hear very often. Suryash, is that consistent with your engagement with the Indian government as well, or do you have any other thoughts on why AI bio is such a big, especially for the region that you work in, why it's such a big problem?
Yeah, I think there is definitely some overlap with the challenges that ASEAN countries and India share in this regard. But I would also say AI bio is a very inherently a kind of a multidisciplinary field, and that requires multi-stakeholder engagement to address, right? And the issue from the governance point of view and from the policy point of view is that it would require a coordinated or synergistic effort from different government agencies at different levels of governance as well, from the federal level, state level, and municipal level, to come together, coordinate, and come up with a strategy and a plan to address some of these challenges. And I think that's where a lot of problem is. There is still a lot of siloed approach that is there in Indian government and different levels of the governance, and which is quite challenging. And everyone kind of thinks it's someone else's problem to address. And this whole of government approach that you see so well in Singapore, for example, is missing in not only India and many other parts of Asia as well. I think that is one major challenge to address. In addition to the things that Julia was mentioning, I think also coming from the bioeconomy and security point of view, and try to bring this to the attention of the policymaker could be a good approach to address this. For example, from the security point of view, India is a country that is often affected by terrorism. So bringing it at that kind of a threat, like what kind of terror activity or agro-terror activity could be enabled by these kind of capabilities that are building up, could be a way to get policymakers to engage more. And also another approach is India's bioeconomy is large and rapidly growing. India produces, I think, majority of the vaccines of the world and the generic medicines as well, right? So we have to bring in that aspect and trying to support our economic growth and see how this kind of thing can, once, for example, have a lot of beneficial effect, but at the same time, what kind of risk that we have to address to ensure that innovation grows in a responsible way. So I think that is the approach to take it forward, but there are definitely some challenges. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think we will chat more about the solutions afterwards, but you've primed us to think about who we want to direct our efforts at, and what are the unique stakeholders that we need to engage in order to better mitigate these problems? So lastly, I'd like to ask Dev, insofar as your work, as technical evaluations aren't really tied to any geography, but also alluding to one of the questions that we have on Slido, do you think that the work that you've done so far translates into Asia in any specific ways? Are there model developers in Asia that you've engaged with, and yeah, insofar as you have?
Yeah, I can take a stab at this. So, keeping in mind, I'm not an expert in Asia policy, but I think a lot of the biosecurity practices do translate well, especially when it comes to governance of models and cloud labs. I think a lot of those same protocols should apply, especially when it comes to open weight models. China has established themselves as the leader in open models, and it's not clear to me that they are taking some of the same security precautions that, for example, GPT-OSS has done, where they filter their pre-training data for biological information and make it more resistant to malicious fine-tuning. So that's one opportunity for additional governance on the model side. And then on the bioresilience side, I think a lot of practices could translate well, such as wastewater monitoring. And maybe there are some challenges with other measures, such as PPE stockpiling. Since the population is so much greater in Asia, it'll take a lot more stockpiling of masks and other PPE to be prepared for a pandemic. But on the other hand, I think certain measures may be slightly easier. For example, in the US, we have a lot of vaccine hesitancy. So even if we have a vaccine available, it's a lot harder to get them into people. Whereas I think in Asia, people are a lot more collectivistic and willing to take personal measures to protect the whole.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's difficult to paint the entire region with broad strokes, but I do think there are some areas where some mitigations would definitely be easier to implement in some context than others. Does anyone else have any thing they'd like to add about why this problem is so unique to Asia? Or any response to what others have said? Yeah, go ahead, Suresh.
Yeah, maybe separate point. Just wanted to highlight two additional threats that we have related to this AI bio interface. I think one of them is that I think we have already seen some examples of it, how AI could be used to create misinformation and disinformation, right? And how that can have an effect on a response to biological incidents. There are a lot of fake news and other things can be created very quickly using different AI platforms, and I think it would require a serious strategic effort to counter that. Second, I think the cyber biosecurity threats, biological cyber attacks happening on biological facilities of different kinds, and also the hospitals, by the way. We have seen some of that during the COVID time when some of the vaccine manufacturing facilities were affected by cyber attacks, and this can be really consequential. One is the IP related issue, but also sabotaging the information, stealing the data, modifying the sensitive data that is less like some work going on in a BSL-4 lab, right? And that can have a lot of effect. And also, if there is an equipment, let's say incubator is holding some important biological samples, and you turn it off using a cyber attack. So those kind of threats are there, and there are examples. These are like present threats. Like it's not something which is a possibility in future. So these threats are there, and how AI can enhance those threats is an important area that I think we seriously need to look at, and there has not been enough work on this. So I thought I would mention these 2 points just to add some more context to the kind of scope of threats that we are looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Instead of just focusing on language models and design tools, there are a lot of ways that AI can accelerate risks that also affect health and security that don't necessarily just relate to these like really advanced models, but insofar as they affect information space and our capability to deliver countermeasures and other mitigations is also really important. So thank you for acknowledging that the scope is a lot broader than what we're used to. So would anyone else like to share about? Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
I think if I remember correctly, there were several cyber hacking incidents in I'll not name some countries, but several countries in Southeast Asia. The health information of millions of people, like their bio information, their about their hospital data being hacked and being sold to the dark market. So it's a threat that is ongoing in Southeast Asia, and the convergence of cyber threats with AI misuse by nefarious actors, it should be also a big challenge in Southeast Asia. But unfortunately, it's not in the top priority of biosecurity community in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, that's very fair. Yeah, I don't have much more to say than that, other than like it's a very unfortunate situation. So I think we've fully, or at least we've explored the space of risks and threats quite well. And I'd like to move on to discuss solutions and ways to try to mitigate all of this, and we've talked a bit about different stakeholders we want to engage in, so different types of solutions we want to bring to them as well. So I'd like to ask the panelists, what interventions do you think is the most promising, whether it's focused on AI safety or biosecurity or defensive acceleration and stuff like that? What is one thing you would like to advocate for, and especially in the region? So Dev, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, I can go first. So this is something I touched on previously, but I think better governance of open models is a key priority here. Just maybe not regulations, but just creating some standards around what's acceptable for an open model release, such as taking precautionary measures like pre-training data filtering, and making the open models more tamper resistant. We've seen time and time again, people are able to fine-tune models to make them stop refusing. We've seen people fine-tune them with more biological data to make them more capable in those domains. So having some sort of practices that are widely accepted by all of the open model labs would be a really big opportunity here. And then on the cloud lab side, I think we have a similar opportunity to create standards of having consistent know your customer protocols and nucleic acid synthesis screening protocols, so that we have that extra layer of defense when we're crossing into the physical domain.
Yeah, that makes sense. The creation of better standards. If I could press you a bit on how exactly, or what are the stakeholders would be best to engage in order to set these sort of standards? I think, would you say that it's best to engage policymakers, or the labs, or AI labs or cloud labs themselves, or some sort of consortium? And do you think, I don't have the best impression that this has worked very well so far. Do you think there's anything different that the region could do in order to make these standards a bit more realistic, actionable?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if there's an equivalent in Asia, but the Frontier Model Forum is something we have in the US and the UK, where model developers can collaborate on shared standards. I know there's been significant challenges to making that work, including antitrust issues like collusion between companies, but that is a starting point just to get the model developers speaking the same language and agreeing on potential standards. And to the extent that there is political will, I think regulations are a great avenue to go down. It's not very feasible in the US right now with the current administration. They're very anti-regulation, but maybe there are opportunities with the governments in Asia countries that may be more likely to impose regulations. And one example that I would bring is recently California passed SB 53, which is kind of a follow-up to last year's attempt at bringing some regulations on frontier model providers. This is basically creating some mandatory transparency and reporting requirements for frontier labs. So I wouldn't call it a regulation per se, but it's a step in the right direction. And in fact, they have a stipulation where this bill will no longer take effect if it's superseded by a federal regulation. So it's really paving the way towards national regulations that could be more, less onerous on all the model providers to follow regulations from different states. So that's one thing I would maybe follow as an example.
Yeah, that's really, I think that's a really good illustration and something that potentially we could try to emulate. I think this overlaps a lot with Brian, your second recommendation on risk management frameworks and trying to translate those risk management frameworks into standards that we want to set for model developers or labs in the region or in China in particular. Would you like to say a bit more about that, or share what your the biggest solution you think is the most promising to pursue now? Sorry, you need to unmute. Yeah.
Sorry, I always forget about that. I agree with the need to have international standards, especially in the area of DNA or nucleic acid synthesis screening. I'm aware that there is an opportunity to shape a existing ISO standard around synthesis screening, and there is an upcoming convening in Singapore to make it more coherent and internationally aligned. We face a risk that there is fragmented screening practices in different regions, and some of the uneven enforcement could pose challenges to global biosecurity. In addition, we could also try to think about how to make the synthesis screening practices more robust, even in the era of AI. So that's one thought. Another thought is I think there is a need for strengthening the multilateral institutions, ranging from the Biological Weapons Convention to the World Health Organization, and then some of the AI policy work or disarmament work at the United Nations. Across some of the recent resolutions and documents, there is some recognition that the impact of AI and synthetic biology would be very significant for these institutions. And one of the common need is to establish functions for horizon scanning and early warning, even if there is not yet an appetite at the global level to have any sort of hard regulations or international treaties at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I appreciate that you brought the interventions to a multilateral level. So we're not only talking about individual governments or individual jurisdictions needing to have regulations and standards, but it's also important to have that top down. And I don't think we can really achieve standardization one way or the other. I think it has to be both. So appreciate that you brought in that perspective as well. Suresh, would you like to share what you think are the biggest, most promising solutions for mitigating AI biorisks in the region?
Surely, Ryan. I think I totally agree with the points that Brian just mentioned, and I think just to complement them with maybe some ground level thing, very basic thing that needs to be done. I believe probably with the exception of the work that Brian and Julius do, I think there has not been a lot of ground level policy research work to understand exactly what kind of AI bio tools are being used by who and to what extent and in which region and for what purpose, right? So we need to do that kind of very, very ground level policy research to understand the landscape of these tools being used in different countries in Asia. And I think that is where a lot of that evidence that we need for an evidence-based or evidence-informed policy making will come from, right? So I think that work is very, very important. It will take some effort to do that, but I think if we do that, we'll have a really good picture of what needs to be done in different parts of Asia. I think another important thing, again at the ground level, is to raise a lot more awareness about this thing, right? As I think we all agree that not still the number of people who will see and understand it as a very, very important threat among the stakeholders is relatively low. And we need to increase that. We need to grow or thrive in certain way, right? So I think the event like this are very, very important. And I really feel we need to have a lot more of these at the regional, but also at the national levels to communicate these kind of priorities and challenges that are there. I think from the Indian perspective, we have the Indian Council of Medical Research that has come up with a guidelines for using AI for biomedical research and healthcare. Again, it's a guideline, not it does not go into implementation side or regulation side, but just says the certain set some basic principles on what kind of AI that we would want to have for the biomedical research in the country. So I think from that perspective, it's a very important first step, but there's of course a lot more to be done. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I think the field is still relatively nascent, especially in the region. And so we're trying to make decisions under a lot of uncertainty. So your proposal to reduce uncertainty by having more policy researchers like Brian and Julius and yourself as well, I think is a really great idea. Just so we have a better idea of the landscape of who's actually using these tools, and maybe after more research, we can update our understanding or the likelihood of these risks. So Julius, would you like to share more about your thoughts on the solutions and pathways for mitigating AI?
Yeah, I think there are multiple sources of possible solutions, recommendations in handling this. In Southeast Asia and ASEAN alone, you can get new guidelines right now from state actors and from non-state actors. From state actors, one example is a guideline, a set of guidelines on responsible innovation in biotechnology from the Ministry of Science and Technology of Malaysia. And it's the first such guideline from the Malaysian government. And it was unveiled in September of this year during the first ASEAN Regional Conference on Bioethics and Biotechnology. It's a very useful exercise, innovation and initiative by the Malaysian government and by the ASEAN as a regional organization. From non-state actors in Southeast Asia, we have a handful of national biorisk associations. So, for example, here in Singapore, you have this Biorisk Association of Singapore, and it has a very good code of conduct for the life sciences, and it can also be applied in the use of biotech and AI. You have other biorisk associations in several Southeast Asian countries that are currently updating their recommendations or guidelines on the ethical, legal, and security resilient biotech innovation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we seem to have converged on the general idea of increasing awareness, but also trying to push for standards and guidelines for better governance of open source models, for cloud labs, for DNA synthesis screening and stuff. So I think that those are very ambitious goals to try to achieve. So for the last round of questions, I'd like to invite everyone to share more about what are the concrete steps that we can take to achieve this sort of future that we're envisioning. So if we had this roundtable again in next year, and this is no obligation, of course, and we were all back in the same virtual room, how would you like the world to be different when it comes to measures taken to mitigate AI biorisks? And what do you think are the most concrete next steps for different stakeholders to take? And you might have already touched on this in your solutions, but if they could be more actionable, that would be, I think, more illustrative. So Brian, would you like to start us off?
So I have two thoughts. One is, if you are a policymaker, I think it will be useful to develop frameworks around incident response and emergency preparedness, specifically for AI-enabled biological incidents or accidents. So we can also draw lessons and best practices from the domain of, say, cybersecurity. In the Asia Pacific region, there is the response guidelines for cyber incidents at APEC, and also a coordination mechanism for computer emergency response team, CERT. And these serve as sort of trusted points of contact for coordinating responses when there are some early warning indicators. And there is kind of regular mechanism for information sharing and trust building. And I think this could be quite a timely conversation because the ASEAN AI Safety Network has just been announced. And so that's one potential direction. Another thought is, if you are a researcher and practitioner in the region, it will be useful to consider getting involved in the global conversation. For example, there is a global AI bioforum, which is a platform for international experts and other stakeholders to sort of identify and share best practices around reducing biosecurity risk. I think the conversation today is just the beginning, and it's very important to have these ongoing mechanisms of dialogue and confidence building.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think really solid advice for both policymakers and practitioners as well. Suresh, what are your concrete next steps?
Yeah, I think a number of countries are creating their own AI safety institutes in different forms and formats. I think it would be really great to have this biosecurity related people working in collaboration with those AI safety institutes. I know that is happening for some Western AI safety institute. I would like to see a lot more of that happening in Asia and other parts of the world as well. For example, India has established a virtual AI safety institute. So have some engagement there with the biosecurity to see the biosafety landscape in a more, let's say, comprehensive manner. And I think that that could also lead to collaboration among different AI safety institute on this particular issue in Asia to come up with certain solutions. Second, I think it's important to note that the next big AI summit will be happening in India. So the AI Impact Summit will happen in February in New Delhi. And I think that could be a platform where a lot of these conversations can be taken forward. And currently, there is an open call for organizing events and collaborations under that AI Impact Summit. So people around the world are invited to also have these kind of events and activities organized, which could shape the theme and the discussions at the main AI Summit happening in February 2026. So I think these are 2 points. I believe there is a lot more work can be done. One, that's very quickly. I think the BWC before next review next review conference, it would be really great if more countries can put up their working papers on AI bio-related risk, right? And I think that could also shape a lot of the discussions that's going on currently with the BWC working group, but also more broadly. So AI doesn't become only an area where a few Western countries and maybe China are only active, but it's more, more broader discussion with a lot more stakeholders. So I would stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, like Brian said, we're only at the start of the conversation. So hopefully, by engaging with the conversation and increasing awareness, we can sort of bring this to the forefront of more countries, more governments. Then they can contribute their perspectives to a more global forum. So that's a really great point. Dev, do you have any thoughts on this?
I honestly don't have too much to add. I think Brian and Suresh covered quite a lot. One small point that I'll raise that I think we haven't discussed yet is also governing closed models. These, I think, are not as hard to govern because they're gated behind API access, and most model developers have pretty good refusal safeguards. But in my testing, I've seen that certain frontier models are much less likely to refuse. So if I was a threat actor, I would probably just try all of them and see which one is, the most easy to use, and just go for that one. And I think there's an opportunity here because it's actually quite hard to strike that balance between refusing harmful requests and allowing legitimate biological research to happen. I would honestly hate to be the frontier model provider that says, sorry, I can't help you with your cancer research. So it's quite a hard balance to strike, and I think there's opportunity for collaboration here to get the right balance and maybe disseminate better guardrails across all the frontier model labs so they don't have to each solve the problem separately.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Julius, would you like to close us off this discussion part with your thoughts on the next steps?
Yeah. Now, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, particularly those behind this ASEAN Leaders Declaration on Strengthening Biosafety and Biosecurity, these senior officials are currently finalizing the plan of action to implement this declaration and also to establish the ASEAN Biosafety and Biosecurity Network. I think this is going to be an opportunity for ASEAN to expand its biosecurity threat horizon beyond just the naturally occurring diseases, zoonotic threats to agriculture, to plants, and to human health, and to expand the conversation beyond the public health issue, expand the conversation to include the AI induced biological threats. And I think in some officials that we have talked to, they are aware of the catastrophic biological potential of AI threats. It's just that given the competing priorities and government resources of Southeast Asian countries, it's a bit difficult for them to allot a lot of fiscal, technological, and human resources in monitoring potential AI induced biological threats. So, given that regional discussions, information exchange, and having a platform for multiple actors, state and non-state actors, ASEAN can seize this opportunity of the expanding the conversation of biological threats beyond the public health issues.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that was helpful for me personally as well. There are a lot of documents and events that I'm going to check out after this call, but the call is not over yet. Now we're moving on to the audience Q&A portion, and I encourage folks to submit their questions on Slido. We already have a lot of really great questions, and I will start by asking Dev, I think, would be the best place to answer this first question. How do we begin to govern open source tools, especially for research communities that have super strong open source ethos?
Yeah, this is genuinely a hard problem. I think really the first line of defense is holding researchers to a high bar of integrity to make sure that they're red teaming their own models before releasing them, and adding pressure from the scientific community to uphold those standards. So that's number one. Number two is creating sort of like communities that can share some of the best practices around safeties measures in open models, such as pre-training data filtering. Like I mentioned earlier, GPT-OSS did a great job of this, but I don't think they did a great job of sharing their methods for other researchers to use. So that's number two. And then number three is individual countries could mandate that their labs follow certain safeguards before they release models. I think China has a huge opportunity here, as well as the US. Those are currently the two leading open model countries. So that's where I would start.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Does anyone else have anything to contribute to this question on governing open source models, especially when communities have very strong open source ethos? If not, we can move on to the next question. I think this is pretty interesting, and I'd open it to the floor. What role do you believe AI insurance should play in mitigating AI risks? Quantitating risks financially, and policies would also incentivize safety and compliance. So I guess AI insurance isn't a mitigation that we've discussed today, or discussed so far, but would anyone like to take a stab at this question? I'm guessing this is still quite a new area for most of us. And I think if no one has anything to add to this, I think it's a question that we will ponder, and maybe we'll have a response to it by the end of the call, or we'll think more about it afterwards. But I appreciate the question. I think the fact that it stumped us is a reflection of how much more there is to be thought about in terms of mitigation. The next question is, what proportion of bio AI models are being developed in Asia? And if there aren't that many, then wouldn't that make the case for biosecurity practices to be the responsibility of developers mostly in the US or UK? So Brian, I think you would have a good understanding of how the AI bio landscape in China. Do you think, are there a lot of AI biomodel developers in China, or is the majority still based in the US? And does that make the case for the biosecurity practices to be mostly focused in the US, UK region?
First of all, I think the biosecurity implication from AI usually involve two types of models. One is the language-based foundation model like ChatGPT or DeepSeek. And I think there is a very high concentration of these language-based foundation model in the US, China, to some extent, France, the Middle East, in terms of the models that have the frontier capabilities. But there's also another type of biological AI model or biological design tool. And earlier in the presentation, I showed a chart of more than 360 such models around the world. And I think there are some features of the landscape. One is it is much more geographically diverse as compared to the language-based models. Also, it is not concentrated just within the industry and the leading companies. It is also very much developed in academia, in open source communities, and generally kind of the compute requirements for training these models are multiple orders of magnitude lower. And then if we think about the integration of these tools with cloud labs, with agentic tools that Delph has talked about, I do think that this is a responsibility and a potential risk that the region of Asia would also need to consider.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the fact that a lot of capabilities, like what you said, the implications are near global, right? And so the responsibility to enact this sort of mitigations shouldn't just remain to countries that where these developers are based in. So Suryash, would you like to add more about this?
Yeah, I agree. I think even though there are most of these models and tools are coming from a very, very small number of countries, the number of users are spread worldwide. And I think in many Asian countries and global South countries, the number of users at one point, I think that will be larger than the people in the countries where those tools are being developed. So I think even though there would be certain burden on the people, just like how is the case with social media, on companies that actually came up with these platforms to regulate them, I think the governments and other stakeholders based in these other countries would also have, have to push for more stringent regulations of certain to reduce certain risks, right? And I think them not being part of that conversation from the beginning, creates a lot of those challenges which come under things like tax sovereignty and so on, right? So I think it's very important for people from all around the world, from all countries, to be involved in those discussions from the very early phase and be part of the solution development for those challenges. Otherwise, we'll be left out and we'll be given a problem that we'll not have a solution to, even though it is impacting us a lot, right? So I think it's very important to be part of that conversation from our industries. Thanks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Julius, do you have any? Have you looked into the number of AI bio model developers in Southeast Asia, and what do you think this argument is for Southeast Asia? Do you think because if we see a lot of developers not based in the region, that the region does not have that sort of responsibility to lead or be part of this conversation?
I think the issue now is who has the responsibility in the consequence of the model, right? So it's in the perspective that we got from Southeast Asia. The responsibility still lies with the customers or with the end user, and whatever violation they might have committed using that a particular biotech or AI tool, the responsibility lies solely on them, and the corresponding national regulation or national law is just limited to within the national jurisdiction. So whoever developed it outside a particular country in South or outside Southeast Asia, they're not gonna be covered by any national regulation.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. We often talk about regulating AI from the perspective of developers or restricting compute, for example. And I think you brought up the point that we need to think about the end user as well and their contribution to any potential misuse. So I think that's a really good point. Yeah, so this question I would pose to everyone, and maybe it's a bit of a spicy question. Given some of the pitfalls with governing AI bio tools that we've seen maybe in the Western context, what are some lessons that Asia can learn from, the shortcomings or the downfalls or the pitfalls of these efforts so far, and how can we avoid them? Or in the context of Asia, how can we try to avoid making the same mistakes? Yeah. Dev, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, so I can speak about what happened in the US. So almost 2 years ago, the Biden executive order on governing AI was released, and I think we were on a good track. But as you all know, Trump took office and got rid of most of what was in there in favor of innovation. So I think, yeah, one challenge that we have is we have this highly polarized political situation in the US. So we flip-flop between pro-regulation, anti-regulation, pro-innovation, pro-safety. And it's become unnecessarily polarized, I think. I think you can have both. I think you can have innovation and safety. But people tend to see things in black and white. We've also had a lot of lobbying from the pro-innovation community, like venture capitalists, to basically undo any potential safety regulations We saw that last year with SB 1047. A lot of the venture capitalist and startup community and big tech community fought tooth and nail to get rid of that. And even though this bill could have been very successful, it was vetoed at the very last minute by Gavin Newsom. So that was pretty unfortunate. I would say the lesson to learn is don't see things in black and white. See how you can, have a win-win situation where you put some necessary guardrails around these models, but still encourage innovation and adoption of the tools. Don't. I think one mistake that the Biden executive order made was it kind of overblew the risks before there was sufficient evidence about those risks, which opened up an opportunity for the other side to beat it down. So I would say stay as evidence-based as possible and do the minimum necessary regulation to keep some safety guardrails on these models, but also encourage experimentation and the benefits of these tools to diffuse.
Yeah, Suresh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the major differences here is that again, most of these tool developers are not based in Asian countries, many of the Asian countries, right? So the Western approach for many of these things have been to find those people who are developing these tools and try to regulate them and try to have like some kind of influence on what kind of data they are training their tools on, what kind of codes and weightages are there, right? That is just not possible because here we have more consumers than the producers of these capabilities and tools, right? So I think the focus of governance has to come not at the level of what goes into the tools, but how it is used in a particular country, right? And I think that's where the focus should be. What kind of oversight mechanisms could work there? For example, do the institutional biosafety committees can play a role in regulating how these tools are used at the level of institutes and at the level of research labs and so on. It's that so that those kind of mechanisms have to be explored in order to better understand how we can regulate those tools, because regulating at the level of how what a tool is and what goes into it is going to be extremely difficult in most of these countries. Thank you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Juliet, I saw you nodding a lot to Suresh's response. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, we have this as an offshoot of our research. We have this journal article in Applied Biosafety, and we had this preliminary review of dual-use research of concern governance in Southeast Asia. And Suresh mentioned about the role of institutional biosafety and biosecurity committees, which are essentially are expected to monitor and to review potential projects that entail dual use implications. In several high performing universities in Southeast Asia, these IBCs are very much active, not just in monitoring or screening potential dual use research in the life sciences and also in the artificial intelligence research. Unfortunately, this kind of strong or active intervention of IBCs in several universities in Southeast Asia cannot be observed throughout the region. There are still many universities in Southeast Asia where it's still free for all. It's still the expectation is still researchers will behave in accordance with the existing norms and that their research will not dwell into something that is hazardous or dangerous. Interestingly, we had this conversation with several scientists in an Asian country, and they would say that their scientists in that particular country do not want regulation because it's stifle innovation and all. And they point out the importance of culture in their scientific community. Like there's always an expectation that they will not violate violate any national laws, and they will not commit crime using science and technological innovation. So that's an interesting finding from our research, that a particular government has no motivation to impose new law with regard to emerging technology, because they have this expectation that their society, particularly their scientists, will not violate the existing laws. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting case study. The idea that governance is based on trust and unwritten rules is interesting to think about, but also slightly unsettling. But yeah. So Brian, I guess the question would be slightly different for you. Instead of what are the pitfalls that in your experience engaging with Chinese policymakers, what pitfalls can they avoid? Maybe you can share a bit about what they have done, since they're a bit further ahead in terms of biosecurity governance and governance of AI biomodels. Could you share a bit more about, based on your observation of what they've done so far in regulating and governing these AI bio models, what steps have they taken, and how are they actively trying to avoid these pitfalls that we see in other contexts?
Well, I would like to continue the conversation about highlighting the approach that could be taken in Asia, in particular, taking on a kind of comparative lens. So I think one is, in Asia, there is a sense of being pragmatic in balancing innovation and safety. So Concord AI has been publishing these reports on the state of AI safety in China and Singapore. And I think both countries, when we look at the kind of expert and public discourse of AI, they avoid the extremes of pursuing kind of effective acceleration towards AGI or superintelligence, or the extreme of advocating for an immediate pause of AI. Rather, I think the discourse has been much more balanced and moderate. For example, prioritizing diffusion of AI into economies, developing kind of practical applications, while trying to advance the conversation and policies around AI risk management. Which brings to my second point. I think there is more appetite of government-led policies and regulations. So, in the US, there is a strong emphasis of voluntary commitments led by the industry. And I think in China and Singapore, there is generally higher level of trust in the government and public policy. And given the level of frontier AI development in China, there is already some mandatory policies. For example, all large models would have to be registered with the government before they are deployed to the public. And that involve a series of safety and security assessments. And then recently, there is also a new regulation requiring the labeling of AI-generated outputs. For Singapore, it takes a more kind of soft governance approach with sandboxing and third-party assurance and other tools. But yeah, just wanted to highlight these kind of regional approaches and perspectives.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think your point about how in the Asian context, there's a lot more emphasis on pragmatism and moderation. I think that really speaks to the point that Dev made about not seeing things in black and white. So I think that's already quite a promising sign that at least hopefully future governance efforts in Asian countries hopefully wouldn't meet the same pitfalls. I'm sure we'll run into other pitfalls uniquely for the region, but it's good that we can learn from others' mistakes to do better. So I think we're almost at about time. I think I'm going to thank the panelists for their time and this conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with all of you and learning about the stuff that you're doing and also your perspective, given your experience with the different regions and also different approaches to understanding AI bio governance and AI bio safety. So yeah, thank you so much. And I'll hand over to PT, who will wrap this up.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you so much to everyone who have contributed to this very meaningful discussion, and for giving us your time. And thank you all to our participants today for being part of today's roundtable discussion. This is only the first of many, like Ryan has said. First and foremost, I'd like to extend my deepest appreciation to our moderator, Ryan, for guiding today's discussion, and to our guest speakers for lending us their very insightful and thoughtful discussion on this emerging area. Your perspectives have truly shed a very valuable light on the ever-evolving intersection of this risk area, especially on how can we harness the innovation, the technology responsibly, while also ensuring that we have security and ethics for our region. To all our participants, thank you so much for your engagement, your questions, and your time. So these conversations only truly become alive because of your curiosity and contributions. We'll be sharing the speakers' details and affiliations with everyone shortly in the follow-up, along with a link to rewatch today's sessions on YouTube, so that you can revisit the discussion, but also share it with your colleagues who couldn't join us today. And once again, thank you so much for being part of this important dialogue. Myself, along with Singapore AI Safety Hub, AI Safety Asia, and Southeast Asia Biosecurity, we look forward to continuing the conversation and working together to shape a safe and secure future together. Have a good night to those who are based in Asia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.